John Kay and the light of Scottish socialism, Harry McShane, two generations of Glasgow trade unionists. At a broken cemetery in the East End, they remember the men who led the uprising of the Carlton Weavers in 1787, the city's first working-class martyrs.
These men were shot after having marched from Carlton up to the Mullen Downer Bridge.
And there were some who were deported.
Well, one was deported, James A. Granger. He was put in trial, and the order was they be put through the streets and be deported from Scotland for 7 years. It was when he returned that the money was raised to pay for these stones in the camp in Somerset.
After the shooting, the city fathers invited the officers of the militia to a dinner in the old city chambers and supplied the private soldiers of the militia with free hose.
They had free hose, and Major General Chet Kellett was the man held responsible for all the conduct, what was being done by the military at that time. His name was Kellett, Major General Kellett.
Harry McShane and Manny Shinwell, now in the House of Lords, are the only survivors of the working-class leadership that once made Glasgow the core of Red Clydeside.
The first unofficial movement was of shop stewards and weighers in February 1915. And they were supported by the whole of the Clydeside shipyards and engineering shops. And from that time onwards, the shop steward movement became powerful and began to assert itself to such an extent that even the government had to pay attention from time to time. And Mr. Lloyd George himself come in for a rough time on one occasion when he come here to speak to the shop stewards on Clydeside.
The poverty and industrial squalor of the years before the First World War drove Glasgow to the brink of revolution. But from this melting pot of industrial unrest sprang a powerful, radical movement. Its leaders had a vision, a united working class armed with the principles of socialism and educated in the skills of democratic politics. New political parties like the ILP, the Independent Labour Party, swept into office. Trade unionists today in Glasgow still carry with them the image of those victories over the strong arm of the establishment. It's been the political backbone of East End shop stewards like John Kay.
Well, the umbrella this is the focal point of Bridgeton. This was the heart that made Bridgeton a political entity. This is reputed to have been given to the citizens of Bridgeton by Rutherglen industrialist. I donated this here for some memorial to himself, but it's well known and believed that it was the only shelter he ever gave to workers. Within a stone's throw of this well-known monument, in London Road there, you had the Cooperative Party, you had the Conservative Party. In Dalmarnock Road, you had the Bridgeton branch of the Communist Party of Great Britain. Further down to the right, you had the Labour Party halls. If you go in the other direction, you had the very large halls of the Independent Labour Party. Further down, you had a little section called the Anarcho-Syndicalist movement. These places had their youth groupings. The Young Communist League, the Young Conservatives, the Labour League of Youth.
But they weren't just political meeting places.
Oh, no, for by the political education of a very revolutionary nature, they also consisted of the social side, where they had weddings, funerals, socials, So it was politics in practice, comradeship in practice.
Over the years, blood-red Clydeside faded. What remains is the pallor of token demonstrations against government policy.
You carry the banner. To work for a living, to stand up and be counted as a person that works for his living and doesn't live off of some social security handouts. People want that. Men must have pride in their manhood.
When it comes to the real crunch, you'll feel workers. Thank you.
Sometimes people feel good comes from sacrifice, but that's been going on for quite a time, and the suffering is worse, particularly in Scotland. I believe this is one of the reasons why you never had riots in Scotland, where many people expected it to come from, because we have a reputation of aggressiveness. The West of Scotland people, because of the political background, prefer to channel any expressions of frustration through political action.
Brothers and sisters, I've come up to give support to all those who are facing ruin as a result of the policy of the present government. Now, Scotland and the Scottish Labour movement have given leadership to the people of this country over many, many years. It was the ILP first founded in Scotland, and Keir Hardie and the Clydesiders who put a lot of fight and leadership into the labour movement in our country as a whole. And what I've come to say today is that we need those same qualities of leadership and solidarity that built the labour movement and gave us full employment. Building ships in Clydeside 200 years ago when the French were farmers. Were brewing beer, and the Americans were cowboys, and some of them still are.
Tony Benn and Glasgow's city fathers at least have in common a certain pride in past achievements. But when today's industrialists gather in the domain of the Lord Provost, it's their public relations, not their heritage, that's written large on the menu. Images of radical Glasgow that have lingered across the years are an inconvenience to modern business.
We suffer from the fact that people still see the image of Glasgow in the 30s, and the reality's changed. I mean, the substance of Glasgow is quite different.
The foreigners who are amazed at our galleries and transport museum, etc. I don't really mean foreigners to the country, foreigners to the city.
I'm very keen on developing right now in the city centre is an inventions factory, and I've got a site which I think will be right.
I've got to go out and tell people, decision makers particularly, to come to Glasgow and evaluate the issues for themselves.
Well, I think we can learn a lot from Hong Kong.
The Glass regions are still trying to cling on to the old image. For some
Do you think it's out?
perverse reason. I think
I must say that having moved into Glasgow a year ago, 100% delighted with everything. I love Glasgow.
What was your image of the city before you came here?
To be honest with you, very poor. I suppose one had an image of the Gorbals, one had an image of urban violence and urban decay.
I frankly would say that when we asked about Glasgow, every bank in London said no.
Right. Well, look, that I think is a major problem that Glasgow's got, its image. People associate Glasgow with Red Clydeside and bad industrial relations. Is that just... No. All right. Okay.
In fact, when our first ship came in, they did not unload and there was a total strike in the port. The port had to declare a lockout that day. And everything remained closed for 24 hours. Because the Transport General Workers Union would not come and unload the ship.
The business of the river, where Red Clydeside raised a final fist. Just over a decade ago, Glaswegians taking pleasure boat would talk of the romance of shipbuilding and the struggle to save it at UCS, Upper Clyde Shipbuilders. It was a long struggle that failed. Bernie Grant works in the one yard that was saved, on that piece of riverbank where they've built ships for 120 years, at Govan.
That's Govan Shipbuilders.
As well? That one?
That'll be maybe waiting to get into Govan Dry Dock for a few repairs on it.
Is that the ship you can see in the stocks just now?
That's contract 259. You should come in here at 8 o'clock on a Monday morning after you've had a few pints on Sunday night when it's pouring the rain. You would see if it was romantic or not. I think quite a lot of the Red Clydeside brigade have disappeared, but the older guys still talk about it, what happened years ago. I don't think I would have liked to have worked in here years ago. I think the conditions these days have improved quite a lot. The worry's always there that the place will shut down, but I think maybe for the next 2 years it's secure. But beyond that, I don't think anybody can tell.
That's the floor. We didn't back a bit round. It's the floor.
This Clydeside yard is succeeding against the odds, as contract 259, now El Conqueror, goes down into the river. There'll still be 2 years of work on the order books at Govan.
I just fought into the slip there. It's a trigger at the after end, the forward end, it sets it off. It sets it off. Years ago, the ships were that big and I don't think they were building as quick as they are today, so you maybe have a launch once every 18 months, and so it was quite an event on the launch day, and people get their best togs on for it and brought their families in to see the launch. But some of the ships get launched without ceremony these days because there's that many coming off the slipways that it's not necessary to have all these ceremonies once every couple of months. When you start in the yards, you go to a couple of launches and maybe go to one once a year, and that's about it.
There she goes.
It's just like a production line in here. There's units coming out of the shed, onto the slipways and into the river, and that's it. The triggers of it.
Yeah. So it's long things like that. Great time to see a launch, eh?
That'll keep us in another job for a few months anyway. Well, that was no bother.
But the price of keeping the privilege of launch days on the Clyde has been enormous. Where once a workforce of tens of thousands earned their living from keel to fitting out, there are now just 3,000 men employed in the Govan Yard. The story is much the same in the city's East End. It once echoed with the daily life of a score of major factories. Anderson Strathclyde, with a workforce of 650, is now the biggest employer left in Bridgeton. This factory, where John Kay is convener, is under threat too. Unions and management are together fighting a takeover bid from South Africa.
How did the meeting go up the stairs?
The meeting of the directors is still in progress, and we're waiting to see exactly where the position is. All right, we'll see you shortly. Multinationals put the fear of death in them when you see the way they have behaved. Company taking over loses its identity with the locality. Decisions are made well outside Scotland. Then you see the demise. And that's what's happened to all the industry in the Bridgeton area. 20 years ago, within striking distance of our factory, you could contact 22 conveners. You had weaving, leather curing, tanning, tailoring, and heavy concentration of engineering.
I thought the visit of the Monopolies and Measures Commission to the works at the beginning of this month was very successful from our point of view. I thought they were impressed with the quality of our people, and I certainly think they were impressed with the quality of our machines.
The arguments of Monty Finiston's board and John Kay's union did impress the Commission, but not the government. Suddenly, the fate of this factory in Glasgow's East End was on the front pages. The Department of Trade ignored the advice of their own Monopolies Commission and said the takeover should go ahead. Hopes here had been raised for a while, then dashed. The management and unions were to fight on, but with the government now against them, they feared that they were that much closer to having their independence and success as mining engineers destroyed. Trade unionists here have seen the steady slide closure happen too many times before, when the control and decisions were taken away from Glasgow. They watched it happen just half a mile from their own factory, at the industrial giant called Parkhead. The Parkhead Forge of William Beardmore was once Britain's forge of empire. 42,000 men worked here, making everything from battleships to taxi cabs. In August last year, just 340 jobs remained, and they were under threat. There was a plan to close Parkhead as part of a deal with the British Steel Corporation to save its Sheffield parent company. Another generation of Glasgow trade unionists then found themselves fighting for the livelihood of the East End. Among them, convener Joe Kearney.
I think if you went out to the street and stopped 10 people out in that street, the first 10 people you met, they would either have a brother or a cousin or a mother or a father or something that worked within these walls.
How many of your family are associated with Parkhead Forge now?
Well, they're my father, my brother, an uncle, cousin, brother-in-law and myself within the works at the moment.
There was a man in here maybe the best part of 50 years. Now, I was only a young fella when I started in here. But I can always mind you, well, when I was in here, it's a lot of hard work. The furnaces are a lot hard work. You're cutting all day, sweat's pouring at you 8 hours a day. Now, I can always make an old chap saying to me, talking about, you love the work. That was all he spoke about, was the work, Parkhead Forge, Parkhead Forge. Well, at that time, there was quite a lot of chaps would chuck this job and come back, and then chuck it again, and then come back. And this old chap used to say to them, he used to go to the gaffer and used to say to the gaffer, don't let them back, shoot them, because they're only making a mug of this for them. That's true. Is that right, Jimmy?
Aye.
Shoot them, don't let them back in this for them. If you thought the world of this factory.
At the Parkhead Employment Exchange, there are about 15,000 people registered at the moment, with 138 jobs available, which puts the ratio roughly 100 to 1. So that's your chances. And I wouldn't put any money on a 100 to 1 shot.
No.
What do you think the impact is going to be on the East End of Glasgow if Beardmore's goes altogether?
Oh yes, there's shops closing down. There's 2 pie shops closed down, 2 small meat firms closed down. And we go out at lunchtime, and we've just passed remarks in the last few months. Every day seems like a Sunday, except the day it is for signing on the dole. It's like Hampden Park coming out. And outside of that, you think every day was a Sunday. Nobody in Parkhead, and that was very unusual.
In older, prouder days, there was a confidence in Glasgow's working family, the confident temper of steel itself. But the old certainties wasted, as first one factory, then another closed. Obsolete, overtaken by new technology, out of place and out of time. Of all the symbols of failure, the most potent is the industrial skeleton of Parkhead. Its old offices have been converted into the employment exchange, a euphemism to raise a rare smile from men tramping the road to redundancy.
It's been a tragedy, of course. Redundancy payment has been a two-edged sword. It was meant originally for good reasons. Now it seems to be the fool's gold, and in many activists' opinions, the 30 pieces of silver, because it ain't their job. The fight is at a low. It's at a low ebb. Certainly, we'll never be able to draw in the battalions, the organised trade unionists within this area, with the shop committee, their trade union organisation, their branch in the area. That in many ways has disappeared. One of the obvious reasons is the social structure of Old Bridgeton has disappeared completely. And to build that social structure, it takes time, which the Old Bridgeton had plenty of. People have been dispersed to all the different areas. It'll take time to build up the social structure.
John Kay and tens of thousands like him had been moved out of the East End. Some happily turned their backs on the slums. Others had to be forced to leave. And this is where Red Clydeside died, in the grey peripheral schemes, Drumchapel, Easterhouse and Castle Milk.
Middle class prefer their schemes to be called estates, but if you're a council dweller, it's a scheme. Their concept was a Garden City type idea, and people went with great hope. They realised it was an immense step forward. Our city councillors were faced with a tremendous problem. They don't seem to have been able to get away from the conception of tenemental living. We found of approximately 50,000 of a population in Castlemilk. Now that's an equivalent to Greenock, Perth, Stirling. But we have none of the facilities that make a community. As long as it is classed as a dormitory town, then it is exactly what the word describes, a place for sleeping in.
While Clydesiders slept, the fight went out of them. In September, the union men from Beardmores of Parkhead tried one last time to save their factory.
Around Savile Street, please.
Joe Kearney went to Sheffield to drum up support from shop stewards at the firm's headquarters. He found the parent company had problems of its own. He found in this other socialist city a similar stench of neglect and decay.
What about the situation in Beardmores? Surely they're not going to leave it to the lads down here to put up a fight. They've got to take a decision themselves.
The position is they've announced a total closure of Beardmores, which, through thick and thin, has somehow always managed to scrape through in some capacity. And what we'll be asking the Minister is keep that presence there. Maybe be on short-time working. We realise we'll be taking a cut in our standard of living, but still, at the end of the day, when an upturn comes, and we've got to talk about when an upturn comes, not if it comes.
Well, the guesswork of when an upturn comes and when it don't come, we've been doing that now since 1970s, haven't we, during that particular period of time.
What I see here is a glimmer of hope, just a door lying ajar, and we've got to go and see what's on the other end of that. I hope to God that they take up the cudgel and fight for the jobs.
Probably the Parkhead workforce have been preconditioned into this day coming because it has been a struggle since 1975.
I think you accept that. How many did Beardmores employ originally? 40, 46,000? 42 bloody thousand people. And here we are, struggling to employ 400.
Yeah.
God, where are we going?
In Glasgow, this is where they're going, turning a replica of the Doge's Palace, a 100-year-old carpet factory, into the centrepiece of East End renewal. A business complex, the hope for the future of the Scottish Development Agency.
Richard, the Minister for Industry and Education, to be here today for the formal opening of the new Templeton Business Centre. It's a complex which provides a range of accommodation designed and managed to meet the particular needs of small businesses, workshops, offices and studio space. This first phase provides 60,000 square feet, and we hope that 200 jobs will be provided. This new imaginative use of an old, attractive building is another important step in the drive to revitalise the East End of Glasgow. All the new industries which come into Scotland are very welcome, but we, in the agency, recognise very clearly how important our old established industries are in maintaining existing levels of employment.
In the last 5 years, almost £200 million of public money has been spent on renewing the East End. Much of it to build new small factories, factories for bagpipe makers, pizza manufacturers. But in terms of rebuilding the working life of Glasgow, small is insignificant. Officially, the new factories and repainted small businesses have preserved or created just 2,500 jobs in 5 years. Today, the East End of Glasgow probably has the most attractive scrapyards in Europe, tarted up in environmental schemes of great splendour. But once, Beardmore's of Parkhead Forge alone employed 42,000 people. Just in time for Christmas, Parkhead Forge was closed. On redundancy day, the men took their checks with anger, frustration and bitterness.
Oh, absolutely sick. Absolutely sick about it.
I can't see much hope in Britain getting a job as overhead crane driver. So I don't know what I'll do now.
So when the men took redundancy, were they resigned to not getting another job?
Oh, I think so, most of them anyway.
Yeah, well, I'm 44 years of age. Where am I going to get a job now? No chance. Well, I'm finished.
We had been a calm workforce, we've been a good workforce, we never went on strike. This place has got a record second to none with strikes. We've never been on strike in this place in all the years I've worked here, except when we came out with British Steel a number of years ago. And that was a totally different thing. But we have sacrificed things in here for the sake of keeping jobs. Terry Scally, the convener in here, has made sacrifices. We've done away with jobs, we've had redundancies every now and again, we've went from 2 shifts to 3 shifts, and vice versa. We've done everything possible to keep the jobs here, and at the end of the day, we've got a kick in the teeth.
That's it. Even coming in the place, that's what I was remarking to Terry that well, 140 odd years this place is in operation, and it's sad to think that it's empty now. You know what I mean? Even the quicker we go to the better, because it just totally depresses you, you know what I mean?
There's people left here in this department a fortnight ago, and it was like a dynasty. People whose grandfathers, their fathers, I can name them, Stevensons, Downies, and right through. Maybe employed here, if the place is up 140 odd years, their grandfather was the original because they stayed in the East End of Glasgow. And the effect that it's going to have in this area outside, it'll take years and years and years for something to come in and replace the effect that this place had outside.
But also, I mean, the men here, they're not walking out with their £18,000 and their £20,000. So it's not a question of the men taking the money and running. It's just that the men have recognised that they just had nothing else for it but take it. And if you were to go around the workforce and say, look, do you think you sold your job? They'd say, well, there's the money, can you get me a job? And I'll buy one. Because almost to a man in here, the men wanted to work in the company. It was a company that didn't want them.
The inheritors of Red Clydeside, the last of Parkhead's strain of working men, could do nothing but stand by while the best of their machines was packed up to be sent to Sheffield. Joe Kearney himself knew that if a fight against the cuts in steel and engineering was to happen at all, it now had to happen somewhere else.
They tried it in Belgium. It's a common market. They tried it in Belgium. And what did the Belgians do? They went out and rioted. The French, they went and marched. The Germans, they put on import controls because they were ready for an uprising as well. The British, we accept it. We had the added problems is that we didn't produce our own goods, that we relied on our parent company to send them up to us. And at the end of the day, the only thing that we could have done was sit in the work. If the parent company don't send up the work, you could sit in here until the guy came home. It wouldn't have made one little bit of difference because the work would have still been getting produced in Sheffield. And this had just been the climax. This was it, the closure of Parkhead Forge.
Have you given up all hope now of saving Parkhead?
Well, this was once the press shop. The men are no longer here. I can't see at this late stage the company sending for them.
It's the finish?
It appears to be, yeah.